Hello, everybody.
Ah.
Jamie, that was a nice pageant wave.
Thanks. Hi, Brittany Fleming. I like it when my worlds collide. Makes me happy.
This is so weird. I'm not Maggie Lynch. I have no
That
idea
happens
how that
every
would
once
even
in a while.
happen.
I don't know why.
I mean, she's great.
It was great.
I think it happens when I don't know, I'll tell marketing that's happening again. Other people it might happen to as well.
Am I the only one presenting today?
We have Jennica, Laurie also presenting. It's gonna, and she, I guess I'll just kind of start because I feel like we're gonna need all the time we can get for questions. So today's summit is about behavioral foster, which is like the most exciting topic in the world for me. I hope that it is you as well. We have Brittany Fleming, the adoption and foster manager at Gateway Pet Guardians, and she's going to talk about the Unicorn Foster Program. And we also have Jennica Laurie. She is the dog marketing manager at Austin Pets Alive. They're kind of the OGs of working with dogs with behavioral issues, and they have some new initiatives that kind of flow from the same concepts that the Unicorn Fosters program is using. So thought it might be fun to kind of put them together. And they also have a video that they just made of their behavioral foster, like to recruit behavior fosters that we're going to get to preview. So Kristen Hassan has said before, fostering isn't just something you do, it is an identity. And I think that is really, really key here. Everybody who fosters, they see themselves as a foster, and everybody who fosters, I mean, a lot of them, everyone wants to be like the most badass foster. So I think making it some of these techniques to make it kind of cool, they really, really tend to work. The great thing is there are more resources now than ever. You guys have a course that you're doing coming up. Is it full?
We have this courses, but we're going to redo. We're also doing it again, I think, in October and November, and then that one's not full at all yet. We're going to be accepting invitations for those.
Awesome, that's great. So I put together a whole bunch of resources as well, because a lot of the concepts we're going to discuss today are also taught in the Growing Your Adult Dog Foster Program course on Maddie's University. Things like making it cool, marketing pets from foster, marketing versus adoption counseling. So at any rate, there are tons of resources and that you can use to build your program. Also, Haas's Behavior Working Group created a how-to document for behavior foster that's in the final stages of reviews. It'll be in the document I'm going to put in the chat, but I'm not going to take up any more time. Brittany, would you like to start off?
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen. Since not everyone was on the Monday call, I am going to, hold on, give me 1 second. Share my presentation that I did, just so we can have just a little recap, but I'll go through it pretty quickly. So my name is Brittany Fleming. I'm the adoption and foster manager at Gateway Pet Guardians. We started this program back in 2019 after I got to attend the American Pets Alive Feline Masterclass, which doesn't make sense. How do I get cats into dogs? But they made the ringworm program cool for people to want to attend it. And we basically use that same method for our behavior dogs, because that's what we struggle with. And I think everyone struggles with that. We decided to call them unicorns because we wanted it to make it fun and perky and make them seem special. We didn't want to call them something negative. So that's where the Unicorn Foster Squad came from. And then a unicorn essentially is a behavior dog. Can be a dog that has dog aggression, human aggression, separation anxiety, stranger danger, extreme leash reactivity, all those things. or basically, I like to say anything that is a barrier for the foster to keep them in their home. So if there's something that's just this foster's really struggling with behavior wise, we might put them in the program for that. Like we had a dog that used to chase lights because she had OCD. So technically she became a unicorn then. When we started the program, we started tracking the data and it showed that it worked extremely well. I don't have the graph, but it was just showing that like the total length of stay compared to what their length of stay was after they entered the program was about a third. So let's say their total length of stay was 1,000 days. We would get them adopted out after they enter the program within a third of that. So it was working extremely well. And on top of it, my most favorite thing is by the end of last year, we didn't have a dog with us past 6 months, I believe. And I think right now our longest stay unicorn has only been with us for 5 months. So we used to have dogs with us for years and years and years. So that just blew our minds that we were able to get those dogs into foster and adopted so much quicker. And essentially the whole basis of the program is to make the fosters feel cool. It's supposed to make them feel like this is exclusive, that they are the cool kids of the fosters. And we do all these things by doing like special perks for them. Like they get a free t-shirt, which I'm wearing right now. They get free photo shoots with photographers with them and the dog, so they can kind of like remember the memories that they've had with them. They get to be part of a special Facebook group that is only for unicorn fosters, and it has like the training team in it. That way they can like complain or highlight their successes, whatever it is. It's meant to be a spot where it's a safe zone for people to be able to talk about whatever's going on without feeling like they're being judged. And then they also get to be part of daycare. We do doggy daycare for our foster dogs because it's continued socialization for them, which is really important. And then we do in-home training for them. And it's very important that we send the trainer to them so they don't even have to get out of their pajamas. That's how it was phrased. Like, you don't even have to leave. We're going to come to you because we're so grateful for you to be able to do this. So all those perks have been really helping. But I also think once we got multiple people into the program, they all kind of hyped each other up and it became like this club. So like now, I think we did a presentation not that long ago with some of the with Laurie, with some of the fosters in there, and just hearing them talk about it, like they sell it on their own. I don't even have to do anything. It's just those fosters sell it to the other fosters. And that's kind of like the psychology of the whole program, is make that, go back to school. Like they're the cool football team or whatever, but instead they're the ones that are fostering the hard dogs. So for marketing, which I know we're going to talk about today, so I won't really get too much into this, but we do the no negative for marketings. We use that for foster and adoption placement. Foster placement, we will obviously talk about all those things. Same thing with adoption. We just don't frame them super negatively when we're trying to market them out. We try to use good photos. And then I think the biggest thing is we are extremely open-minded about who can be a unicorn foster. We make them feel like it's a very exclusive club, but in all honesty, anyone can be a part of it. I mean, anyone, no matter what your age, no matter how many dogs you have, anything. So when we market them, we don't necessarily market just for unicorn fosters. We market for fosters, and then we turn them into unicorn fosters. We don't think you have to have experience with behavior dogs, because how many of us had experience with behavior dogs before we first had ours? My first foster was dog aggressive and I had dogs, and I just had to figure it out. So it's the same idea with a lot of our fosters that come into this program. And then I'll just kind of highlight with a few good success stories before we get into everything. Jelly Bean, her name was Jillian. We renamed her for marketing to see if that would help. And she went to a foster after being at the shelter for an entire year. She had so many barriers for someone to want to take her. She was extremely dog aggressive, extremely leash reactivity. She had some stranger danger, and she had really bad separation anxiety to where she would poop in her kennel every single day. So she had to not be in a crate, or, you had to figure it out. So Brigetta took her and she got her adopted within 69 days after being at the shelter for an entire year, which just blew our mind. I just could not believe it. And we still have a great relationship with the adopter. She actually lives in a high-rise apartment right now, which you would never think could happen, but we just were open-minded and we gave it a shot, and we did all the resources for her, and it's been widely successful. We also had Mose, who he was a puppy that we got. And of course, when he's got older, that's when the behavior problems came out, and he had bit like 4 or 5 people. The adopter just had too busy of a lifestyle with people coming over that it wasn't a right fit. He did not want to get rid of them. They were very nice about it, but they knew if they kept him, he was going to get more trouble. So They brought him back to us and we told him about the unicorn foster program. And he said, I'll give you whatever money you need to be able to put that into him. So it helps him get adopted. So he gave us about $1,000 and he got adopted within like 2 weeks, which a dog with that many bites gets adopted within 2 weeks was crazy, because when we told that adopter, we will support you that entire way. We have all this money that we can use for training and et cetera. She took advantage of it and she's had him, and it's been maybe a year now. And everything's going good. And she honestly didn't even need to use all the training. It just needed a different household, you know? And then Touche, she was also renamed for marketing because she had been with us for so long. She was with us, I think, a total 3 or 4 years. We actually got her as a puppy. She was about 6 months old, and in about 8 months, she started showing really intense stranger danger. She would forwardly charge you and act like she was going to bite you and scare the crap out of everyone, but she would never actually bite. So I always said, technically the liability is not there, but she scares everyone. So how do we get her adopted? So she bounced from so many different foster homes back and forth from the shelter over like 12 times since she was a baby. And that's so bad for them mentally, with especially in that growing stage. But once we started the program, she went into it and then she didn't move and she got adopted from them. It still took maybe like 6 or 7 months, but she got adopted from them. And she actually lives with a couple in their 70s, which so many people would never think that type of dog could live with someone with that age of couple, but they're perfect because, you know, they've lived their life and they don't need people to come over, and she's like the perfect setup for them. So the big point I always like to push is be open-minded when you're thinking about these things and trying to find creative solutions for your behavior dogs. And then here's my contact info too for the rest of the time if we have questions after. Okay, and then I'll quit sharing.
Awesome. Do you, a question, how do you guys recruit for the program?
So
Is it mostly-
we recruit anyone. We don't necessarily say, hey, we're looking for unicorn fosters. We're saying we're looking for fosters. And then when someone applies, like we're see if they're a right fit for the dog, we're going to try and sell them that dog, no matter what the situation is, you know? And then if they're like, okay, we're like, well, hey, they're in the unicorn foster program, so you're going to get all these extra perks. And then we're like, okay. So they just kind of, you know, we just ask them and they just come into it. We in the past have specifically marketed for unicorn fosters, but I think like publicly, and I think some people just don't get it. So, and then I think people think they need to be a behavior foster to be able to do so. So instead, we just kind of convert any foster into it and just offer them the right support, and then they take advantage of it.
Awesome. Other questions? Okay, so Veronica, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I was just wondering, Brittany, if you guys pay for any sort of advertisement or do like paid boosts on social media, or is this just all your normal comms?
Sometimes we do sponsored social media posts, but you know, maybe $10, $15, and the budget that we use for this program, that would go towards it. So we have a specific budget. It's technically, I guess, for the training, but I use it for marketing and all that stuff, because honestly, a lot of times once these dogs get into their foster home, those shelter-based behaviors don't exist anymore. So they don't even utilize the training. Same thing with adopters. So we never go over budgets, which blows my mind, but we're never over budget with the training. So the only thing that really costs is the shirts. And then we contract out the trainers because we don't have a trainer on staff. But that's kind of it.
That's awesome. I was also on that subject going to ask if you did any additional incentivization other than the shirts or the training.
So sometimes I'll offer, you know, like a free dog bed or dog crate or whatever, if we have a gift card or something like that for the fosters. But for the adopters, I will continue on and say, hey, in the future, we do these events where you can bring them in for free photos. Like we did a Valentine's Day shoot for them because these are the dogs that can't go to like PetSmart for photos. So we do it ourselves and we make it all like super controlled and it's free for them. We did Christmas photos. We tell them they can donate if they want, and people do, and they love it. They love that they feel like they're still part of like the community, I guess.
Julie, Lonnie, did you want to ask your question? It's a really good one.
I was just wondering, where, you know, for dogs with multiple bites, how do you deal with liability? I mean,
liability forms. And Jamie used to be the executive director of me. So that was like the biggest thing. I had to make sure I had all the liability forms for this program to work because, you know, the executive directors, that's what they have to think about. So we have so many liability forms. We have a liability form on our foster application and our adoption application, and that's for any dog. It's just a little blurb saying, you know, we won't be held liable if anything happens to you or the dog. And then on top of it, we use Shelter Love, which has a section called attributes, which if a dog has these things, whenever they get adopted, the person has to sign acknowledging that. If you don't have Shelter Love, you could just actually make the forms for them to sign. But we have them sign everything and people are okay with it. You know, we explain it and say, hey, you know, I have to tell you these things, you know, this is part of the process. And they're like, okay. And not a single person has ever said, oh, no, I changed my mind.
And I think that's a big part of it is the transparency of everything. So, and making them see those attributes in Shelter Love was a big game changer.
Mhm.
Then they could see exactly what they were signing up for. And we always had those conversations we had them as conversations and positive conversations. Gateway is like the epitome of like positivity and making sure everything is positive. Every conversation's positive, verbiage on our website's positive. All of those things are just your positive, 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 because you know, how many of us have behavior quirk dogs that we didn't necessarily sign up for that, but we have them. And I would be devastated if somebody was talking about my dog in such a terrible way. They just, you know, new adopters just need to know. But yeah, liability forms.
And I would say on top of that, like, and it's important to have whoever's talking about these animals know them because they're gonna know that these dogs they're not monsters. You know, if someone just reads all these negative things, they're gonna frame them really negatively. So you want someone that like cares about the dogs and, you know, like understands that those behavior issues don't outweigh the amount of love those dogs give you. You know, the love is everything that they give, and they are good dogs. They just maybe had to struggle with certain things. So that person needs to make sure that they highlight them and push those things.
I'll make one other point too, because I saw Danica was asking about, or was saying liability farms aren't foolproof, which is 100% correct. We at Gateway always did a really comprehensive job of explaining liability to our fosters because it is confusing, and it was always a really odd thin line to walk with. If we get sued, the foster is probably going to get sued as well if it happens in your home. So that is a really touchy subject, and explaining that to them that it could happen. But also the management, that's where we really went deep into management and how to avoid those things at all costs. However, we have had our liability forms protect us in litigation. So one specific litigation that it completely protected us because they signed off knowing that the dog could bite in the home.
We had lawyers look at the stuff. It's not like we just made them. That we had a lawyer look at them and say, okay. I mean, because anyone can sue you for anything. I could sue you guys right now just for being on the live with me, but it doesn't mean I'll win. So that's where those liabilities for come in. So they say, and, you know, and it is about being honest. I don't want anyone to feel like they've been tricked. I'm going to tell them everything. And if they struggle with anything, I'm going to make sure they know that they still have my support. I think that's where a lot of the issues have come from. Like my first dog that I adopted, they didn't tell me he bit a bunch of people. They didn't tell me any of those things. So when I was struggling with it, they were just like, oh, squirt him with the spray bottle. And I was devastated because I had no idea what I was doing. So instead, it's like, if something happens, I will be there for you. You have my personal phone number. I will do anything you want. And that keeps them happy, you know, and then they feel like they have that support and they're going to keep that dog, you know, and then they're not going to want to sue because they don't feel like they've been cheated or screwed over.
I think that in adoptions, we have like we usually have like a really good process for ensuring that the adopters get the pet's history and know exactly about the history of the bites, so, you know, or whatever behaviors they have. We just need to make sure that in foster, we do the same thing. I think that's kind of like a new, an emerging need now that we're putting, you know, pets with behavior issues into foster. So.
And not to use blanket terms, like don't just say, oh, this dog bit, that's it. Explain the situation, because then human brains understand that better. Like this dog has an issue meeting new people and the person came into their personal space. If you don't invade that personal space, they won't feel like they have to defensively bite. Explain those things and help educate them, and then that really helps.
Hey, Brittany, I have a question regarding the foster experience and also the type of fosters that are taking unicorn dogs. Do you have an idea of how many fosters took a non-unicorn dog before taking a unicorn dog versus that being their first foster dog?
Well, I would say majority of them, the unicorns end up becoming unicorns because they have something happened once they were in the foster home, or the foster was struggling with something. So most of the time they take the dog and they aren't unicorns, and then later on maybe they're showing really bad leash reactivity and they're like, hey, I'm struggling. And I'm like, hey, let's put them in the unicorn program to give you support. So honestly, I want to say there's maybe only 2 or 3 actual fosters that are like, I want unicorns. Everyone else just kind of just takes them because we market them in the right way, and then they feel supported throughout it, so they keep them. So again, I always like to go back that anyone can take them. I think we do a disservice if we make them sound like they're monsters from the beginning, and I mean, anybody could take these dogs. I mean, we could have a dog that has intense separation anxiety that could live with an 80-year-old because they're home all the time, and it's just about being open-minded about those things. And then same thing with college kids, because I think so many people roll them out because they're young, but they're the best. They are like some of our best unicorn fosters because they're young, they're open-minded, they're willing to learn. And most of the time they don't have dogs because they're away from their house. So they're take the dog aggressive dogs and say, okay, tell me what I need to do. And they listen, as long as you provide the right education, then nothing's going to go wrong. You just have to make sure you give that support to prevent anything from going wrong.
And then just a follow-up question, that just so we kind of have a better idea of the scale of your program, like how many dogs are going through foster in general? And what percentage of those dogs are unicorn fosters in your program?
We send every single dog to foster unless they get adopted straight from the shelter. Every single dog, no matter what, even if they've had bites. Like, because to me, I always say I don't want to judge a dog based on a shelter behavior. I want to make sure that they can live in the real world. So no matter what, every single dog goes to foster. So like 100%, I would say maybe 99%, because sometimes the really highly adoptables get adopted the same day they come in. And then as far as unicorns, maybe 10%, maybe I would say. And it's usually just throughout the year. Technically it could be a lot more, but I'm very strategic about what goes in for money purposes. It could be, 30, 40% if you really wanted to, depending on how picky you wanted to be about the behavior issues, but I have to be strategic for money reasons.
Awesome. Veronica, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I have to keep muting because my dog is barking a lot right now. I was just wondering, Brittany, do you offer any length of time, or do you ask for a time commitment when you send them out at first?
So we just say until they get adopted, because I think if you put a amount of a date on it, it gets really confusing. And along with that, we used to have a foster form that would say, do you want to do a slumber party, which is maybe a day, or do you want to do perm foster? And I think when people want to sign up for fostering, everyone gets cold feet and they always would select slumber party. So I actually took that off the foster application, and now if you want a slumber party, you just put a foster application in, and then I think that actually helps get them more wrapped in and more committed, and then they're willing to take someone longer. So that was like a different change I did recently, and I've found it more successful. Instead of giving them the option straight up front, they can tell us that later, but that way they don't know that's an option, so they're willing to give more time for the program.
Brittany, can you talk a little bit just briefly about like the intake process? Because I do think that Gateway has a really smooth and quick process for when they come in. So which also helped out a lot, because the dogs weren't in the shelter long enough to find out what their quirks were in the shelter, which I think is a really important point.
Yeah. Sorry, I gotta keep eating cough drops because if not, I'm gonna start hacking up stuff. So for our intake process, if they are at animal control, we go weekly and we're kind of evaluate them. We don't do any safer testing or anything like that. It's really just for placement to see if they can live with other dogs or not. So I go up with our intake manager, we just dog test them and see how they do, and then get some good photos to market them for placement. And then our goal is to get them out as fast as possible, because everyone that knows that works at a shelter, the longer they are, the more behavior issues end up coming up. And then it's going to be harder to market them and all, so forth. So we get them out as soon as possible. And then, like I said, usually that maybe later on, that's when issues arise. Or a lot of times the dogs that maybe I think might have issues, as soon as they go into foster, they don't, and they get adopted within like 2 days. And it blows my mind. But the thing is, like, and this is something I learned because I started off working in a training place with owned dogs, not unowned dogs, like in a rescue field, and people are willing to do anything for the dog that they're already connected to. That was we could offer them to try so much with their dogs, but when you're in in a shelter-based thing, when you don't have that owner, it's so much harder to sell them. So the sooner you get that dog with them, the sooner that bond grows, and they're more willing to do whatever needs to keep that dog. So that's why it's important to get them into the foster home right away. That's why it's important to get them into their adoptive home right away and not put any delays on those things, because you want them to get that bond as soon as possible.
And so the process specifically is that they come in from animal control, and then there's a specific intake day where they get their photos. Gateway had professional photographers set up that day. Photos are taken immediately. They get a bath. If there's the availability, surgery was scheduled the next day for spay neuter, and then either they went home the day of intake or the next day after surgery, but fosters were already signed up and ready to go. So the process is they're not there for really any more than like 24 hours.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to be like someone, because our old foster person would let someone come in and you'd have the row of dogs and they would all be barking and be like, no, oh yeah, that one's easy, yeah, let's take that one. And it's, you got it, placement's a big puzzle, you got to figure out what will fit in different places so you can get more of them out. If someone comes in without any other dogs, I don't want to give them the dog that can live with everyone. I want to see if they'll take the dog that can't at first. And if you ask people, they're willing to try it. If they're not, that's fine. We can try something else, but it's about always asking, there's nothing wrong with it. You can't go wrong by asking someone to try something.
Kelly, I know that we have another presentation that you're going to transition to, but I just had a quick question for the group as well, because I think I love this marketing so much. At the core of this is absolutely strategic life-saving. And so I'm wondering, for all the folks that are on this call, how many dogs do you think are in your facilities, if you operate a facility, that might qualify for this program? I just want to get kind of a range of how many animals we could be benefiting just from this conversation.
Bobby, do you mean a hard number, like now, annually, or
I would just say annually? How many animals or dogs do you think could potentially be unicorn fosters that you're having a difficult time placing?
Probably a couple hundred.
I have a question too. While people are answering that for you, Brittany, are you pulling dogs from the shelter with known histories? You mentioned that a lot of these are coming, the history is showing itself once they're in the home, but you're also pulling animals from the shelter with known histories.
Yeah.
What kind of where are they getting that information, and what kind of notes do you have on them to give to the next person?
So it's mainly like, if it's from animal control, if they got owner surrender notes, usually owner surrenders don't really highlight them negatively. It's more the notes that they had while at animal control. I always take them kind of with a grain of salt, because I know our animal control doesn't take them out. So it could just be stress based. And I want to give them all a chance in a environment where it's not so crazy, to see if those issues are just because they had some traumatic happen. But mainly from animal control. And luckily, we've gotten to the point where we have open kennels to be able to take those hard dogs, like as soon as they're available. I mean, the past year, no dog sat past a few days at animal control from our service areas, because we got them out so fast, which is awesome. So now when there is a dog that they maybe are thinking needs to get put down, I come in, I'm like, hey, can I try it? Let me just see. And a lot of times they work out. We had one recently, just that it makes me really excited, is she was there and they were going to put her down because they thought she was super aggressive, and she just got adopted with someone that's in their 80s that no one would think she could live with, but it's for her son, who is in his 20s, who's a recovering heroin addict, who needs that type of dog. And it's like the perfect setup, because he's like, I understand behavior issues, I have them myself, I don't judge that. And it's like, oh, it makes me so happy, because that dog could have been put down, and then that guy would have never had that dog, and we wouldn't have given him a chance. So yeah, they let us try everything now, which is really, really awesome.
That's amazing. And I love this program so much, and I love the positivity that's attached to it. I think it's just really amazing how you've created this team, and people have so much pride. I came to your volunteer presentation and everyone just seemed so proud to be a part of this program. Are you all feeling okay if like other shelters start saying unicorn foster too? Because I know that's come up a couple of times. Like, we don't want to step on your toes, but
I just want to,
away.
I would just like to still they use the same methods. As yes, I don't care. Just as long as they use the same methods of being like open-minded and like not just so it's the same path. But yes, that's why we're teaching it, because we want other people to be able to do it themselves.
Thanks, Brittany.
And the term itself has been around for about 5 years. So yeah. And so actually we were going to moving over to the other stuff, or do you guys have a
Can I ask Brittany a real quick question? Yeah. Hi, Brittany. This is Julie. I asking you from a trainer perspective. So these dogs, do you think that the success of some of these dogs is due to the training?
Yes, and get them in a foster home, because then they have that consistency, because behavior problems come up when they're not having the consistency in their life. So yes, the training 100%. I mean, every now and then we might have to put one down because it's not successful, but we know we tried everything and we got them into the real world to see. And I'll get a lot of support for those fosters if something like that happens and they still come back and try another one. But yes, the training definitely a big thing. But being in a consistent home in a way is training, because they get structure.
Right.
So.
No, absolutely. And I totally, I think the environment plays a major role in, being able to help these dogs. And I'm sure that management is just as equally important with these guys. It has to be a combination of training and management, go hand in hand kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to move on to Jennica, Laurie, the dog marketing manager for Austin Pets Alive, but we're going to have time for questions for everyone afterwards. So we'll get to read. You have a couple of methods that you were like strategies for work for making it behavioral foster cool, and then a video that you guys just created.
Yeah, we've kind of been, we internally call these fosters kind of unicorn fosters too. So it's been really interesting to hear about all of this. And we kind of have put forth some marketing strategies in order to try and recruit more of these unicorn fosters at APA. And of course, many of you know our population, and we need mostly unicorn fosters, and most of our dogs have some kind of behavior quirk. So we're kind of doing a relaunch of the behavior foster program, where we created a whole video around it. But a couple of their strategies we'd used was, one of them was the success story strategy that we've been implementing on our main social media, and that we're going to push over to our foster page, where it highlights not just behavior dogs, also really difficult medical situations, and some just more middle of the road dogs, talking to their fosters and their adopters, so that people can understand a little bit more this is an example of one. This is Malik. He was I actually had the pleasure of meeting him once in a public space, and he's just incredibly on leash reactive to other dogs. So he would be like this perfect dog and then start screaming the moment he saw another dog. But he was great in the home, and he had some medical issues too. We ended up, after he got adopted, we did a success story on his foster and his adopter, and kind of what they did in order to market him from foster to get him adopted, so that they could reopen their foster home to take in more dogs. And this particular post had a lot of engagement, almost 1,400 organic, so we didn't boost or anything, which is, when you're comparing it to our other posts on our page, that's definitely higher level for us. And so we noticed that a lot of people were engaging and commenting and just saying, like, these stories are bringing us to tears, and we're so happy for this dog in this situation. I just think in a field that, like the one that we're in, people need that in order to, they need kind of that positivity and that happiness in order to be re-energized to go and take a dog like Malik or one of our other behavior dogs, and they can really understand and see the different kind of love that a dog, when you'll see in the behavior foster video, promo video, that there's just this overwhelming sense that the dogs that are more difficult or have these behavior quirks, that they give even more love to the foster because they know that they're going above and beyond for them. So we do get to kind of highlight that. This is actually a shorter one. They've gotten a bit long, but people love it. So we do these every other week, and it seems to really kind of tug on the heartstrings and pull people in. Another thing that we did that we worked on was Google ads, which Google ads will often give we get like $10,000 in free credit or something like that. I would have to look into how that even happened, but I'm pretty sure they kind of give it away left and right. But that allowed us to do some more targeting. So we were able to, Google for nonprofits, thanks, but we were able to set up some Google ads without fearing that we're spending money on something that might not work. And what it does is it allows us to target certain people. So without saying like, oh, this dog hates children, we could, do targeted messaging towards adult only homes without having to say like, this dog can't be within a 10-foot radius of a child or something like that. So it kind of gives you the flexibility to try different messaging, use different keywords, and see if you are able to, find an audience. And there's way more that we can do on our end still, but it's been like a really interesting, we did one that pointed to a blog that we wrote that was like holiday themed around the holidays, and one that went straight to our website, and just testing different things. And it is really nice because they do give you that free credit. So that's something a little bit different that if shelters aren't already using, it's not usually a cost. And then just for the behavior promotional video, we are kind of relaunching our behavior foster program, which we've always had, but we're kind of just like, we're giving more resources, more support. We're relaunching it in order to make people understand what it really is. And as a part of that, I got to work on a video where we took foster testimonials from some of our most difficult dog fosters. And it was just honestly like a really amazing experience, and hearing about what some of these dogs have been through, I think helps people understand why it's so meaningful to be able to foster a dog like this. So I will let Kelly show the video.
I'm gonna, if you can't hear, please let me know. But I think that I did it the correct way.
Hi, I am Laura Thomas, the Dog Behavior Program Manager at Austin Pets Alive, and we are launching a pioneering behavior foster program. In this program, people can join the ranks of our fosters who like working with dogs that have behavior challenges. And those challenges can range from anything from on-leash reactivity to territorial behaviors, to dogs like Bridget here, who is extremely reactive to men that she doesn't know. But as you can tell, she's an awesome dog that's completely worthy of being in a home. So we have a number of fosters who are already doing this work with behavior dogs, and we're going to turn that into a structured program. In the program, we will teach people how to train dogs with behavior challenges. We will support them while the dog is in foster by talking them through any problems that arise and doing in-person training sessions whenever necessary. And then we will help the fosters get dogs into a forever home.
So working with a dog that has behavior challenges, or any of the behavior dogs, there's a few different things that I really do enjoy about it. So for one thing, usually the behavior dogs have had a lot of training set up by the behavior team as well. And that gives them a really strong basis for learning future training behaviors. And I really appreciate that. I find dog training fascinating. In addition to that, it's just nice to be able to give these dogs a chance to really change. From my understanding and from what I've seen with Rio, he's night and day into the shelter and out of the shelter. So being able to foster a dog like that and give him a chance to kind of have a normal life, it makes a really big difference.
Roscoe has some stranger danger. He doesn't really like it when we're on walks and strangers are either walking towards us or they'll walk behind us. He can get very reactive. And actually recently he's gotten really, really good at kind of ignoring them, or at least acknowledging them but not reacting. One thing that we've done is every time he kind of sees a stranger, he'll breathe heavy and he like kind of looks at them, right? but every time he looks at them, if I just say leave it, he kind of is like, okay, just whatever, don't look at it.
So to know that we're helping a dog that might not have a chance elsewhere means a lot to us. I think, just pulling a dog from APA already feels like we're helping dogs that didn't have a chance elsewhere. But really, knowing that a lot of the dogs that come to our home probably would have been euthanized elsewhere, we know that, we're really rescuing these dogs from a different kind of fate. And again, like I said, I think that they also sort of somehow recognize that as well, and kind of give that love back equally.
What I love about Roscoe is this. His goofy personality comes through all the time, and the more that I got to know him, the more it kind of came out, which was really fun for me, honestly. He's just like, is a goofball. So like when he's really excited or something like that, he'll just spin in circles and be like a big goofball.
So what I love about Rio is that he is, at least inside the house, he's like the perfect dog. I can leave him to roam all the time. He's entirely fine. He's never gotten into trash. I think I've left like a plate of food on the coffee table as he slept on the couch overnight, and he never looked at it. He naps perfectly throughout the day while I'm working. He is amazingly well behaved around the house, despite, as far as we know, really never having spent a lot of time in the house prior to going into foster. He just sort of has that natural knowledge of what we want him to do. He's amazing in that way.
What I really love about Cookie Monster is that he's super cuddly, major cuddle bug. At night, he wants to like be in bed right next to you, right on top of you. He loves to get on the sofa and just kind of like hang out. Whenever my husband and I are together, he wants to be in between us always. And so he's just a super snuggly guy. Makes him a lot of fun to have around the house.
The biggest rewards from doing this is just seeing their progress, because when they first, especially with Roscoe, when he first came to me, it's very high energy. We couldn't even really walk down the street without a huge reaction, and now we can walk down the street. I know playing fetch with him is like his thing, and he's even gotten better at fetch with his little quirks when we play fetch. And so seeing them not change, but change for the better and just improve has been absolutely rewarding.
So if you are interested in learning more about this type of work, please reach out to us. We are excited to meet you.
All right, I'm like trying not to cry right now. Danica Kubik is here, and I just wanted to ask you a few quick questions before we go on to Q&A. How does APA work with unicorn fosters? How do you prioritize them and support them?
Sure, yeah. So right from the start is the answer. So if we get a general inquiry from the public, even before they're an approved foster, that tells us that they could fall within a unicorn category, meaning for us, no kids or no other pets in the home, we'll work with them right away, even before we approve them, as long as they meet our 2 minimum requirements of being 18 years old and within our radius. And then when they apply and their application reveals that they're a unicorn home, we specifically target them. So we reach out to them with special messaging and connect them as quickly as we can with our specialized matchmakers. We do have matchmakers on staff that work to move our more challenging behavioral and medical dogs into foster care. So we try to get the people who have newly applied engaged right away and set up with our matchmakers right away, so that we don't lose their excitement as to why they applied. And we have them in the hands of people who are trained to matchmake these dogs as soon as possible. And then, when a matchmaker gets connected with somebody who might not have been, maybe they applied and they were not at that time a unicorn home, or let's say even that they can keep the animals separate, or let's say that, maybe they're moving to an apartment for a while that makes them a unicorn home. Our matchmakers will always work to steer our higher level dogs to those people. Their priority is always the higher level dogs in the shelter. So we do our best to kind of work with homes that could be unicorn homes as much as possible. I definitely echo what Brittany had to say in that we don't require any advanced training from foster parents. We do place higher level dogs into green foster homes. And what happens to ensure that it's a good match is that we work with that green foster on the specifics of that dog. So that green foster gets the behavior consult specific to that dog and any sort of behavior session specific to that dog. So that's the training that we provide at that time, but we don't require any training in advance. And that in a nutshell is kind of how we specifically target and try to engage unicorn fosters. We also have our database. We are able to email our unicorn fosters specifically. So sometimes we'll separately email them. And then we'll also reach out to fosters who have previously fostered higher level dogs to try to re-engage them to take another higher level dog. So we try to keep those fosters that have proven to be really great at fostering higher level dogs. We try to keep them active, engaged, appreciated. We also really try to get their stories from them so that we can share them on our social media, so that we can share them in our weekly updates to the rest of the fosters and in our month in reviews. So we target those people for their stories because that's, getting the word out to fosters who might be interested in this is hugely important to the effort.
Michelle, did you want to ask your question? She had asked about the tiny homes and what
the tiny homes. Sure, I can give a general overview. So we have 2 tiny homes on site at our downtown Austin animal shelter. And I don't know the dimensions, but you can imagine kind of like a backyard shed, and they're in terms of size. And then they're decorated and painted to be like a tiny home. They have some furniture in them. And the whole idea is some of our dogs that aren't doing so well in kennel get to spend their time in shelter in these tiny homes. They also have a outdoor enclosure that is fenced in as well around the tiny home. And so it's just an opportunity to give those dogs more of a home-like setting and to maybe shield them a little bit from the chaos of what can be shelter life. They get a little bit of a barrier break from that and potentially a noise break. So we recently installed them, probably, I would say within the past year installed them, although somebody can check me on that. Does that answer your question?
I believe so. Her mic is not working. Yes. Hillary, did you want to ask your question?
Yes. So I had the opportunity at the beginning of COVID to help with foster applications with APA and really got to see the database and how fosters are tracked. And I was at Austin Animal Center previously, where we just have a long list of fosters and they're not divided into different groups. And I thought it would be really nice for everyone if Danica, Jennica, and maybe Brittany could talk a little bit about the tracking of the fosters, organizing them, and being able to follow up with very specific people and what they have, because I think that is what elevates being able to place these dogs into foster.
I can take that one to start. So unfortunately, we don't have an integrated CRM, but this is good news for fosters who don't have a lot of budget for something like that, in the sense that you can do it without that. It's just usually you have to do it with more than one database. But so we do use Shelter Love, but Shelter Love is not where we primarily track our fosters for the purposes of emailing and separating them in groups. The primary way we do that now is number 1 through MailChimp, where we tag fosters once they're onboarded as to whether they're unicorn or whether there's another attribute we want to tag them with. So that we can separate the email distribution lists. But don't despair if you don't have MailChimp, because our primary tracking tool is as simple as a Google Sheet. And so what happens is our onboarding teams, who is all volunteer, when they approve the application, they enter the applicant into this Google spreadsheet with just the basics of their name, their email, their zip code, in case you ever wanted to target by zip code. And then we have 3 columns that are conditionally formatted to highlight when there's no dog in the home, no pets in the home, no kids in the home, and if they have a fenced in yard or open access to the outside once they exit the home. And so it's very easy then for our engagement team and our placement team to see when a foster either has 2 X's in a row or 3 X's in a row, because it highlights either partly green in a green color or or a fully green. And then that tells the people who engage with fosters when to separate that person out as a unicorn foster that gets different engagement after they've applied.
And I would just echo, we do pretty much about the same stuff. When we did the apprenticeship down there, that's how we kind of learned how to utilize Shelter Love and Google distribution lists. That's how we don't use MailChimp, we use Google distribution lists. But we email every foster every single time because we don't have as many at our shelter as APA Austin Pets Alive does. But yeah, pretty much exactly the same thing.
Thank you. I just think it's really fabulous to have such targeted ways of separating and really seeing what is doable. I mean, obviously, Brittany, like you were saying, there's just because they don't meet the requirements doesn't mean they can't take a behavior dog. But thank you.
Thanks, Hillary, for the question. And I would say that I can't wait for, the progress I think that the animal sheltering world is making on the software front, hopefully eventually to be open access software, not for pay software, where this kind of stuff can get more sophisticated, because it would be huge to be able to easily discern or come up with an email distribution list based on who doesn't have a foster dog, who does, who recently had one, who didn't, who's what type of home, what the preference is, all this stuff. That's just, it's a little too sophisticated for our world right now, but I really think we're headed in that direction.
Wanted to ask both of you, you kind of touched a little on marketing versus adoption counseling and the difference between like an internal foster plea and an external foster plea, and how you might, like target those the same or differently, or with how that works.
I can speak on that a little bit. And Danica, feel free to add too. So the foster team does a really excellent job of sending out pleas via email to the foster base. And they also maintain a dog foster Facebook group that anyone who's foster can join, which is really nice because obviously you can't catch everyone on Facebook, but between email and Facebook, you can catch a lot of people. As far as external, we don't necessarily just take what's sent out internally to fosters and put them externally out to the rest of the public, mostly because I think that there are different ways you can kind of tug on the heartstrings for someone who's already fostered versus someone who hasn't. And also I think you can use a little bit more jargon that people understand and who have already fostered and been in that world versus people who haven't. So I think that we pull a lot from those emails and kind of some of the language and things like that, but we make it more, we make it a little bit more like we know that we're tailoring it to the audience. You know, the audience is people, there might be fosters, people who've already fostered in the audience, but a lot of them, most of them probably haven't. So it is a little bit different, but I think that we kind of work together to make sure we're getting the same like message across and we're using the same level of urgency depending on where we're at and what the population and who needs to get out.
I guess, Jennica, what are your thoughts on transparency? Because where I lean with it is that for an internal audience, you can be a little bit more honest about the situations you're facing. Is that kind of where you lean?
Yeah, I agree, because I think people understand, like, especially when we're talking about medical, people who have already fostered a medical dog are going to be less afraid of fostering another medical dog, or a person who's fostered a distemper dog is going to knows what goes into fostering a distemper dog, and so they're going to be a little bit less afraid of it versus a member of the general public who might be like, distemper, no, like, stay away, my dog will get it if I foster a distemper dog even though they're fully vaccinated. So I definitely think that we can lean towards transparency more in the internal when we're going to foster people who've already fostered versus people who have no idea.
And I would say we do about the same thing too. Internal, please, we might say, this dog will do best if you don't have any other pets, blah, blah, blah. So the people that ask about them, that automatically applies. But if it's anything external where adoption, people might think of it for adoption, we wouldn't list that. Because if they apply for that dog, we might be able to adopt another dog that maybe can live with dogs and whatnot. But yeah, internal, we're not going to make them sound horrible, but we might just put a few basic things in that we wouldn't do publicly through the public non-fosters.
Hillary, did you want to ask your question?
I was curious where you get trainers from, Brittany, if they're like contracted in-house.
So we don't have paid internal, so that's why we have to contract it out. But anyone can call themselves a trainer, so it's important when you look for someone to shop around, just like how they say to do with like your counselor. Be picky about it and learn what their training styles are, where they learn from, get references. So the ones that I've used is one guy that I worked with that is amazing with hard dogs. And then like other people that have worked at shelters and just have good reputations and stuff, but you need to be picky about who you use. And there is a reason why we do in-home. I don't know if I mentioned this before. Yes, it's easier for the foster, but it's also more important to train those dogs at their house because that's usually where those behavior issues are. Minus maybe leash or activity. But if the dog has stranger danger in a home and not outside, there's no point of training them somewhere else because they're not going to show that behavior issue. So that's kind of where the in-house part comes from. And then they do discounted prices. We have some that might do it for free, but the good ones, they just do discounted prices for us. And then I saw the second question. The criteria is like I asked like what their training methods are. Like I will never use the old school method. What is it called? The punt, where you basically are trying to be like the alpha. I don't remember what it's called anymore. Kind of like what Cesar Millan uses. We won't use that because we've seen too many dogs get screwed up with that and then end up biting people because they feel like dominant style. So we don't use that. We kind of are open-minded to see what works for the dog. Like we have some positive only trainers, we have some blended. We kind of just go with what the dog needs, if one doesn't work, we're open to trying something else. And our trainers know that. They know time is an issue, so they kind of have to do what they need to do. And the end of the day, it would be nice to only do positive only the entire time. But when time is an issue, you can't always do that. And your credentials, not necessarily like the one trainer that I use the most, he didn't actually go to training school. He's just really good. He understands dogs. So no, not anything specific, but we knew from other people, I would say. So it's not just some random person we don't have any history from. It's word of mouth from different people saying how they helped with this and whatnot.
And like he is the unicorn of trainers, I feel like, too. The one that Gateway uses most often. He's just like an incredible human being with like crazy connection to dogs and can turn a dog around. And we've learned over 10 years that to just trust his instincts, and he'll be honest with us too when it's necessary.
Do we have time for one more question, or are we about out of time?
It's your show, Kelly. You tell us.
All right. Does anybody have one last question?
I do. Hey, Brittany, this is for Brittany. The trainer that you use, do they work with several dogs at the same time? And usually do you have one trainer that stay with the same dog throughout the course? Like you wouldn't necessarily change a trainer, like have a trainer in the beginning and then change kind of thing.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to change it because then it's gonna be too confusing for the dog and for that foster. Because essentially, when we're doing training, we're training the dog, but you're training the person too. So if you're telling them one thing and then someone else is telling another, it's gonna screw everything up. So yeah, we keep the same trainer throughout the entire time. And what was the other part you asked?
I was just wondering if you have one trainer for several dogs, kind of. Okay. It sounds like right?
We have two to three, and it kind of depends. Like the one that doesn't charge anything, I give her more of the easy ones, like maybe it's like leash or activity or something. But where the ones are like really biters, they're going to go to the more expensive, harder person that really knows what they're doing, because we need to get to the root of the problem. And they do different. I mean, like when they're doing a session, they're only focused on one dog, but they have multiple clients with us, with the fosters.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
I didn't ask you if you have a link to where people can get more information on your course. If you want to throw that in the chat. Awesome. So next week we have Ann Dunn. She's going to be coming from Oakland Animal Services and talking about some of their initiatives, including their DEI initiatives. And I think that's about it. But we'll stay on so Brittany can put the link in the chat. There we go. All right, awesome. All right, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brittany.